Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figure It Out cast. I'm your host, Adam Koralik, here for October 2020, and I am once again cursed by being with Rob. Rob, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Wow, fascinating. But yes, so today we have a whole bunch of subjects for you guys today. We also have a guest on who will be here in a little bit. But as always, this is a Patreon-backed podcast. So if you are a member of my Patreon, you have immediate access to this the day it comes out. You also get early access to other videos. You can pick subjects for this. You can get shout-outs. You can even be on the podcast, as is what will happen later. But yeah, aside from all that stuff, what's going on with you, Rob?
Not much. So the darndest thing happened. A couple weeks ago, Adam apparently has decided to bow to the pressure of the millions and millions of YouTube comments from my parents exclusively. You know?
Actually, you're half there. I was at his house, and I talked to his parents.
Yep.
But anyway, go on.
So, Adam has decided, because there's been a groundswell of love and support from the YouTube comments, a very rare thing these days, very, very rare, that people would like me to stay on the podcast. And Adam is, he's a pragmatist, but he's also, he's a realist. So he decided that we're going to create a new Patreon stretch goal, since this is a Patreon-funded podcast, as Adam has so mentioned before, that if we reach $400 a month in backers, I will become a permanent member of this podcast. So, for the price of a cup of coffee each month, you can adopt some poor, unfortunate loser from New Jersey and give him the chance to talk about nerdy shit on a podcast.
It's weird because when I was at Rob's house only like a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to his mom, as he mentioned, and basically he's just doing an impression of his mom right now, being like, "Can you just let my poor Rob be on your podcast? He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't get out anymore." And I was just like, I don't remember you talking like that, but okay. But you know what? We'll come to an agreement here. So we're coming to you guys. At the time we're recording this, we're actually very close. It's like 377. So he's not even joking. A couple people buy the equivalency of some coffee, and Rob secures his place for a little while. And then his mom will be happy, Or conversely, you could buy Adam a cup of coffee, because he does accept that. Instead of the price of a cup of coffee to fund the Patreon, he also accepts payments in coffee. It's true. I do enjoy coffee.
And we will say that there is one more perk about this stretch goal. A lot of people have expressed interest in getting an audio version of the podcast. So as part of that $400 stretch goal on Patreon, the podcast will be put on Spotify going forward. So there you go.
Is it just Spotify?
We're going to look into other options right now. So far, I've only kind of worked out the details with Spotify and Podbean, but we're going to look on Apple Music and Napster and all that stuff, too. Pandora.
Wait, Napster? Wow, okay. What is this, 1998?
Yeah, it's going to be on LimeWire and Kazaa and MySpace.
And Morpheus, right? Morpheus. Illegally download a free podcast now.
And get tons of viruses for your
yeah.
Anyway, so
yes,
bottom line, if you want to see more of myself, my beautiful face on this audio podcast, and you want to support and help Adam's channel grow, please go to patreon.com/Adam Koralik and become a monthly backer.
Yes, but if you don't want Rob, it doesn't mean the reverse. Don't remove your patronage. Just tell me, like, Rob's got to go. It's okay. I'm very open to that information. You don't have to vote with your wallet on this one. I am willing to listen to words and polls. Okay, But to get back to a serious note for a second. All right, so we do have a whole host of subjects that will be coming up here in a bit. And all of them are in the description of this video. So if there's any subject where you're like, I like that more or less, or I'm more or less interested, whatever, you can click to the time code therein and go ahead and check it out. So before we cut away to bring in our guest, is there anything else you want to leave these fine folks with?
No, let's do it. We are here with our guest of the month, all the way from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, is our good friend Abdullah. How you doing, man?
I'm fine. How are you guys?
We're good. Can you correct Rob's pronunciation on the name of your country, please?
All right. So let him do it again.
I said Emirates, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Emiratis.
Okay. Emiratis. Okay, pretty good. Okay. Pretty good. A C+. That's okay.
Okay. All right, you passed. It was a pity pass, but you got through it.
All right, but if you say that one more time, you're gonna fail. I'm joking.
He's a tough teacher, man. It's fine.
Actually, I was pretty good. Emiratis. All right, pretty cool.
Okay.
All right.
Good to know.
Awesome, guys. I hope you're all doing well again.
Yeah, we're doing great. And you backed the podcast. Is there anything you want to tell us about, or who are you? What's going on with you?
All right. So first of all, I would like to thank you guys for giving me this wonderful opportunity and giving me some of your time to actually talk about this. So I really wanted to thank you guys for that. And before...
Dude, you don't have to thank me. You're already the high bar. Like, I'm used to dealing with Rob. This is already way better. Anyways.
It's okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm sorry, but I took your place.
It's okay, man. I already like you better than Adam.
Yeah, see? Okay. It works perfectly. You're balancing us out, so it's good.
All right, so how about now if Adam likes me more than Rob, and Rob likes me more than Adam, then I'll have a podcast with each of you guys individually, so you guys can know what you guys mean to one another. You guys should
as soon as Rob gets his own channel, we'll see how that works out.
I think you guys should know how important you are to one another. So each one of you knows. So each one of you, thank you. So each one of you, we're gonna ground you, and each of you has to talk to me, and you're not gonna like that.
Okay, thanks, Dad.
No problem.
Yes, sir.
Problem. Anyway. All right, now go play some video games.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so the first thing is I wanted to just introduce myself. My name is Abdullah Mahboob. I'm from Dubai, United Arab Emirates. I am currently a university student, and the thing that brought me here actually to the podcast is because mainly the thing I did was support your channel, Adam, and honestly,
thank you for that.
No problem, appreciate it. Actually, I should be the one thanking you because I've recently got to know about the concept of the Patreon. I recently got to know about Patreon, so and how good it is. So I started to back people who I have been following their content for a long time and enjoyed. So, honestly, I have supported lots of, as I told you, a lot of the people I enjoy the content of, and all of these people I supported are actually video game related, and especially when it, as you might know, I believe I've informed you guys, and I'm informing the people now who's going to listen, that I am a video game collector. And that's what made me dive. That's one of the reasons that I went to your channel, Adam, because of the things that you do and these videos, lengthy videos that talk about a subject in an extremely, I would say, informative way. And as someone who has a university background, I do find it enjoyable. As a student in university, I actually find it enjoyable as I listen to your video. Actually, sometimes I listen to them through the headphones without watching the video itself, but most of the time I do watch. And when I hear these videos and listen to all of that, it's actually very informative, as I said, and very interesting, and I've learned a lot from it, honestly. And so that's who I am and why I'm here, I guess. And the main thing I did actually was to support the channel. So that's the thing that I really loved. And as something I believe in is that if I do have the money or do have the power to help out people who gave me a smile, then it's my job to return the smile back to you. That's what I work with.
Wow. I appreciate that, man. That's really nice.
Thank you.
way nicer than anything Rob has ever said to me.
Okay. Now we're gonna have to
This is
talk
why
to
you-
Rob.
No, it's always about Rob causing problems.
Dude,
But yeah.
I think I literally said almost that exact same thing when I first joined.
No,
the podcast.
you just.
But now I think it has a different vibe when it comes from overseas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see, he's got like this awesome accent. You just sound like Rob. That's not exciting.
Yeah, it's just Rob. All right. It's good that I have an accent now. At least I can go brag to people about that. The first thing I would like to say is that I would have never been here. Being able to talk to you, having the courage to talk to you, had it been for so many people, and if you don't mind, I would like to mention all of them.
Of course.
So the first person being my mother. I would have never had the courage to become a person who can talk to even the English. All the English I learned, I got. That was because of my mother's, of what she has made me go through as a kid, and how she worked hard for my education. So I would have never been able to reach any sort of position anywhere else had it not been for my mother. And I would like to I'm not going to mention people in order, because honestly all of these people who have led me towards this path have their own, I would say, their own contribution to that. So shout out to my sister Hamda, my brother Ahmed, and the biggest shout out actually in terms of video game collecting, I would say, would go for my friend and someone who is like a brother to me, Sayyid Athir Ali. So if you're listening to this, Sayyid, thank you so much for giving me all the power as well as the energy to engage in, let's say, socializing and talking to great people that I've always followed their content, and having the courage to reach out, actually. So the biggest shout out in terms of video games and the main topic we're talking about here, I send the biggest shout out to my friend Sayyid, as well as all of the people who are with him. That'll be Umar, who's also called Chucky, and everybody. I don't want to. If I keep mentioning all the names, I wouldn't finish. So that would go. I would give a biggest shout out to Sayyid in terms of video game collecting, and to my family for supporting me all the time.
I actually did have a question for you. So, all right, you're in Dubai. If
Yes.
I were to come to Dubai, where would I go to like get video games? Because that's my priority. It's like Burj
Yes.
Khalifa, some food, and then the
Yes.
video games. Where am I going?
Of course, yes. Okay, so let me. When you come to Dubai, I give a shout out to my friend right now. That's Sayyid. Sayyid has a shop in UAE that's called, that's in Dubai actually. It's quite 15 minutes from my house. It's not that far from where I live. And the shop is called Gamer Squad. And that shop, Adam, I guess that's the main shop you might want to go to when you come to Dubai. Now, that may be biased when it comes to, because Sayyid is my friend, that you might consider that biased, but honestly speaking, even before I personally knew him, I've always been attracted to that shop. The shop is fairly new, because I've always seen this shop through Instagram. And Sayyid's shop is different. There's a sort of connection you find. You would usually, I believe when you would go to any store, you would just tell them, okay, I want this game, okay, how much, okay, pay, and you're done. But the difference is, what I had an experience with as someone who came the first time to Sayyid's shop, Gamer Squad, the experience was personal. You feel connected to the shop owner. You don't feel that you're here forced to buy. You feel that you're here to actually engage in a nice conversation about video games. And okay, you want to buy? Go ahead. You don't want to buy? No problem, man. It was a pleasure meeting you. I hope to see you again. So that's what makes a difference. So I suggest that if you guys, anybody of you would come to Dubai, go check out Sayyid's shop, Gamer Squad UAE. You can just Google it and you can find the location if you're ever in UAE. And again, I'm telling you from now on that the experience you're going to have personally with the owner who's Sayyid, or even any of the people working in the shop, it would be a sort of personal thing. You would enjoy hanging out with them more than actually buying. Because there are lots of times when I even go to the shop to Sayyid and just sit around, sometimes play some video games together, or just talk about even about personal stuff sometimes. And actually that's how I became a friend with Sayyid. Through his effort and through the amazing way he promotes and talks about video games, at the same time making it at the same time it's a business, I believe that's what makes it special. So that's the place I would suggest you guys to go. Gamer Squad UAE.
Yeah, I want to check it out if I ever go there, but it actually made me kind of think, like, retroactively, this is a cool subject because we never really get to talk about this. So when we talk about video games, we often focus on North America, Europe, and
Yes.
Japan. So, but but the Middle East, what is the gaming region? Do you just import most of your stuff from? Like, I knew one guy like 11 years ago. His name was Jihad. He was in Bahrain. Or Bahrain,
Okay.
and he said he got all his stuff from Japan. So do you most of your stuff come from Japan? Does it come from the U.S., Europe, or just kind of a fusion? Like, what is that like?
Okay, so that's actually a very, very interesting question. I would say sixth generation of consoles, seventh generation. From that, and until the beginning, until back to the first video games, I'd say that most of the things were imports. While we do have in our country that there were some things that were modified into Arabic, I would say that let's say the most common thing was that it would be imported from Europe most of the time, and sometimes you would get shops that would import from the US. And I do know one shop, the childhood shop, the shop that was there during my childhood, and unfortunately it closed down. It was called the Joystick. Now that shop used to bring American games as well. That's North American games. And when you speak about Japanese items, actually, personally, I've never seen shops here sell Japanese items. So most of the Japanese items, I believe, and from what I've seen in my experience, is that most of them are actually imported from someone personally. I do not see any sort of shop here dealing with Japanese items. At least when they do, it's very minimal. So that's where we were before. However, now...
That's actually fascinating. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, no problem. Alright, so when you come to the current generation, I would say, so I'm not technically sure where this started, but I believe in the 7th, or definitely the 8th, it's there. You have lots of consoles and games that are actually, they have the Arabic on them. So you could say that it's somewhat of a local region, but I believe most of the main regions would still be the North American, European, and Japanese. So that's where it comes by. Now I'm not really sure how things play out because for example, you have the Switch now that's region free, so it really doesn't matter. For example, I would say, and yeah. So when it comes to this, I would say that for now we're kind of having somewhat of our own region, I guess. I'm not really sure about the technicalities of it because most of the time because most of my knowledge and most of my interest in video games are retro, so the current gen consoles, I don't really look at them a lot in terms of importing. I usually just get it from the shop and plug and play, and not really into the whole importing when it comes to the current gen. But in general speaking, yes. For example, I do have in my personal collection my PS4s, and my Xbox Ones do have some PS4s. Actually, I don't have the Xbox One. At least I had one, I would say. So the PS4, for example, I would see Arabic on them, and I believe the Xbox there is Arabic on them. Now I didn't get to double check on that. And yeah, so that's quite interesting. And you would see, for example, the label, the age, it would be written in Arabic, because that's good because we actually have a community here. We have the MENA region here.
I find that a lot of countries kind of opened up their doors like around the 7th gen. Like prior to that, you didn't see much outside of like PlayStation 2. You would see a lot of PlayStation 2, like across Europe. Like you go to Poland or whatever, they didn't get anything until before PlayStation 2. Like PS2 came along, they got that, and it's just like it's changing around the world. It used to just be like a handful of countries got games, and it's been expanding, and it's really cool to see that grow and change throughout the world. So it's really nice to get your perspective on that type of thing, because granted, I might come to Dubai at some point, but until then, you're what I've got to go on. So I appreciate that. So let's move on to the next subject here.
All right.
You guys ready? It's you actually picked this one. It was how will the shift to digital formats affect physical video game collecting?
Said on the shop. So when it comes to physical games and physical items, I would say it matters. Okay, as a regular gamer, you wouldn't mind. At least you've got the game anyway, digital, whatever. You have the game, that's fine with you. All right, but him as a shop owner, he needs the games to be physical. That'll be better off in terms of a business. And I think of it as well in terms of a collector. A collector, I would like to see a game physically, hold it, and actually you look at the cover art, and that would be something interesting to me as a collector and have it up there in my collection. You see that most of the collectors, they like the physical. They're interested in the physical because of the way the physical games or physical games, let's say, because of the way they look. I would say in a collection, that would be one of the reasons. Actually, there are disadvantages and advantages when it comes to technicalities, but I would say that anybody who's a collector would understand why physical games are actually they're special. So that's where kind of the question came from, and I wanted to know what do you guys think about the digital shift and the future in, I would say, the game collecting world and the game industry in general. This is what I think. I want you to ask.
So, the way one of the first things you brought up was your friend who works at the video game store in Dubai, and I think that's a whole subject in and of itself. Is like the this game sales in terms of collecting and things like that. There's actually a great documentary which a friend of Adam, a YouTuber by the name of Pat Contry, who runs the Pat the NES Punk YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm aware of the channel.
He co-produced last year a documentary called Not for Resale, which is the story of a lot of independent game stores and video game preservationists all across the United States, and the looming shift to digital on the horizon and the impact that it's going to have on them. And basically the bottom line is, like, if the advice to give somebody who says, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to open up a retro game store, what do you think, is don't. Because there is a wall that video games is fast approaching, which is unfortunate for people like all three of us that collect physically. I've always said that once there are no physical video games, I'll probably stop buying video games. I think Adam has said the same.
Yes. I assume that'll probably happen this generation. I've said it a few times about the PS5 and Xbox Series X. I think we have this digital edition of each version and a physical edition. Yes. I do not believe that those two models can coexist for the entirety of the generation, and that at some point they'll scrap one of them. Either physical media will scrap it out and hold on throughout this generation cycle, or it won't. But either way, I cannot imagine we enter another generation after this where we're still using physical media. But the difference is, by then, I'll probably be in my 40s. I don't know if I'll care anymore. Like, I'll care about video games for the history and all that stuff that I already love about it, but and will I be at a phase of life where I don't care what's new anymore? Because that happens with entertainment. And I mean, we're talking about something that's probably like 7-8 years away anyway. So it is inevitable that digital is coming. It is going to take over. It is going to replace things. The slowdowns, in my opinion, can really only come from certain countries where the internet infrastructure isn't necessarily there yet. But the reality is, with the video game industry, and I'm sure you can attest to this because you were just saying that really you guys have only been treated as like equals in video games, really this generation and maybe even the previous one. But the video game industry tends to focus on, like, what is Japan doing and what is America doing, and then the rest of the world you can just benefit from the windfall of those two countries. So if those two countries are like, yeah, this is what we're doing, and we'll get back to that actually towards the end of this podcast, specifically about Japan, then it's just kind of foisted upon the rest of the world to just kind of deal with it. Microsoft in particular has reached a point where they're really like, I don't even care what anybody other than the U.S. is doing. They just focus on the U.S. market now, and then they just release stuff elsewhere. At least Japan is going with this illusion, PlayStation is going with the illusion of caring about the entirety of the world's infrastructure. But I also think the sad thing about video games, as far as physical video games goes, is some people point out, like, hey man, vinyl went away and it came back. The problem with that, though, is that vinyl is vinyl records are like an open source format. Like, anybody can go ahead and produce new records. But there's no one is going to be allowed to fire up an original PlayStation 1 print presser in 30 years and say, hey, let's make new PS1 games. The only way you can make them is through unlicensed means that will still require the things we see now, where you have to use mods or hacks or, mod chips and the thing like ODEs and all that stuff. So physical media will simply reach a point in video games where I don't think it really has any great chance of surviving. I think the only reason it's held on as long as it has is because the data is so much bigger than music and then movies. Now movies are getting to the point where entire companies are starting to phase out their DVD and Blu-ray production. Like, it's just the direction we're going. And with music, again, we are seeing an increase in vinyl, but that's really just for the purists, and it's not everything is hitting vinyl and vinyl is exploding. But meanwhile, cassettes are completely dead. CDs are actually underperforming vinyl for the first time ever since the 80s. And it's the times that are coming, man. Video games inevitably will stop being physical, and the audience that cares about them being physical will dwindle and go away. I'm sorry to say it, but it's going to happen at some point.
Well, yeah, I believe it's the inevitable truth. I would say that's something we can't really stop, because that's where we're going right now, I guess. And I believe that all what you just mentioned is factual, because this is the trend that we see. Because honestly, I have one of my friends, and he's not a collector; he's a gamer. So most of the things he cares about is just playing the game itself. Now, we're not saying, I don't think you guys are saying that video games are dying. That's just the way they are being produced, or the way that we get them.
They're bigger than ever.
We're just talking about their distribution method. About the distribution method.
Yeah, so that's something that we ought to clear when when you get into a conversation with a lot of people, because I've spoken to some people and they think that I'm saying that video games are dying when it comes to the digital thing. That it's what's dying, I believe, is the classical definition of a video game. It's that the classical definition, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would say that classically speaking, it's just get a console, get some games, and put them in the console and play. But now, I believe as soon as you reach the 7th generation, I would say, it's shifted to updates and things like that. So this is how I believe that digital is taking over in so many aspects, and now it's going to completely, the whole game is not going to be a disc or something. It's going to be as you stated, everything's going to be digital. So I believe that's how the trend is going. And actually, I'm just restating everything that you just said, maybe in a different way. However, So, however, I wanted to mention just one note. Is when it comes to this, I will tell you something and tell me what you think of it. So when it comes to that things are dying and not becoming, they're becoming all digital. What is the shift, or what do you think in regards to the general shift in the market, the general shift in the video game industry? I would say to digital. How would that affect retro stuff, or the things that we have right now?
So it's an interesting idea, and we don't know how it is going to affect. Some people could say that an all digital future will force people that want physical media for their video games to look backwards, and I could see that happening. Like, Adam used the vinyl analogy, so most of the vinyl that is being produced now is reissues of older records. And I think you could possibly see that again with video games. Lately, there's been kind of a trend within limited release video game companies like Limited Run or whatever, I Am 8-Bit, to do new releases of... or re-releases of older games on older hardware. Castlemania right now is selling this Genesis shoot 'em up collection with Truxton and Zero Wing and some other stuff.
There is an argument against that, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah,
chiming in.
Yeah, I'm playing devil's advocate. Don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think the prevalence of homebrews new games for older systems still, like the Dreamcast, like the Neo Geo, like the Sega Genesis, and homebrews like on the Super Nintendo and the N64, I think you could see some people still really latch onto that to do, but modern video game systems like the Xbox One, the PS4, even the 360 and the PS3 are built such as that creating new games for those platforms, especially physically, is almost impossible to do.
That's the point I was going to hit on.
You just last month or the month before saw the last Wii and Wii U releases because Nintendo is not allowing companies to release them anymore. They don't have the materials to be able to make these games anymore. An older system from a company like Sega, who doesn't give a shit, and maybe thinks that new games on the Dreamcast are quaint and cool, that they're keeping that system alive in a certain way. That is what I could still see happening, but I think maybe, that's what. But in terms of me, I could just see myself just really maybe digging a little bit deeper into certain systems, maybe newer systems. Like, oh, you know what? Like, what were some good games that I missed during the 7th, during the 8th generations, and trying to discover new games that way, as opposed to waiting for the latest and greatest Call of Duty 2K 2022, on the PlayStation, 5. Instead of doing that, I'll just wait for the, I'll just look through some of the older stuff to see if there's something that introduces me. But Adam, you had a point you wanted to make?
You pretty much said exactly what I was going to say. The point you made about how companies like Limited Run are doing some of these reissues. They're either doing reissues of games that already exist. Like, so you'll see these new N64 games, but they're not really new. It's just Episode 1 Racer was re-released, stuff like that. And if you see re-releases on, say, Sega CD, that's fine. It's an open source system. It's from the beginning. It wasn't, not open source, probably not the right term, but you could burn discs for it natively out of the box. Yeah. You just didn't have CD player or CD recorders in 91. So you are yet to see a new game produced and sold in an official capacity for a retro console that had any sort of disc protection. You can reproduce cartridges. We have homebrew guys that do that. You can reproduce discs as long as they don't have disc protection on them. But you also have to factor in which companies that own that hardware are going to want to be involved with it anymore. So if we go to the vinyl analogy, you sit there and you're like, okay, when they release, say, they must re-release the Beatles albums from time to time, right?
Yes, they do.
And what is it, Big Apple Records that owns the Beatles?
It's Apple Records, not Big Apple.
Okay, I thought Big Apple was like the Michael Jackson company, not to be associated with Apple Inc.
No, Apple Music is
whatever.
Well, Apple Records, is the Beatles.
Either way,
label.
The parent company that owns it still exists. But who is going to? Not that anybody would care about this particular system, but who would make new games for the Amiga CD32 in 2040? Nobody. Nobody's going to put that on a store shelf, or even if it was a one-time successful thing. Say, the PC Engine or the TurboGrafx 16. Well, NEC doesn't even really exist. Konami owns the rights, as we just saw when they re-released the TurboGrafx Mini. Konami had almost nothing to do with the success of the PC Engine when it originally occurred. So you would basically have to bank on Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony still not only existing, but having a vested interest in re-releasing original compatible material for hardware that's at that point 40, 50 years old. Why would they do that when they stopped production of that decades prior? So the only way you'll see those type of things is through third-party methods that require bypasses, like we were talking about with ODEs or mod chips or whatever, or just you'll release them for things, as you mentioned, like the Sega CD, where Sega doesn't care, and there's nothing in the hardware, the original hardware, that prevents you from being able to do that because it's just straight-up CD-ROM technology. Those are the exceptions, but even then, they don't end up on the store shelves at a major store. They end up on an online retailer that specializes in the niche that is retro video games.
That was the thing I was going to actually mention to you, is that, thinking about these, these limited physical games, I would say, for example, we mentioned Limited Run company. So When it comes to this, yeah, I believe that as you again stating what you mentioned before is that it's something inevitable that we're gonna have to eventually, live with, is that they're not gonna be physical anymore, and even the current physical market, the re-releases, as you said, it's not gonna be as common or as I would say not as common to be seen by people, and not as common to be sold as well, because you have only the dedicated people. As far as I believe, the dedicated people would be the ones who would care about this. But when we're talking about the general public, that's the reality of it. And again, coming back to the vinyl analogy that you mentioned, again, yeah, okay, so vinyl is back, I'd say, in a way, but is it the same? Is it as big as it was before?
Hell no.
No,
Yeah,
it's.
so
I mean, vinyl
not.
for 50 years was the musical standard. There was no other way to get music other than vinyl. Now it's kind of a niche thing that you can get at Urban Outfitters, or an audiophile like myself could say, "Oh, you know what? I really want the White Album remaster on vinyl," and Capitol Records and is going to release certain things like that. But it's very niche. It is not the. I mean, still probably. I'd say like 98% of people get their music from streaming services or purchased downloads from places like iTunes. The rest of that, the other 2% is probably split between CD and vinyl. So even though vinyl is bigger now than it has been since the early 1980s, it is still minuscule niche.
So yeah, so that's what the point I was trying to get to, and I believe all of you guys are trying to get to the same point, is that it's, even if we do have some physical releases, I mean, compared to the general public, that would be a very small fraction of the interest, I would say, in terms of the whole industry or the whole community behind video games, because as far as as far as I know, I believe, is that they are not, most of the gamers, especially when it comes to the relatively new ones, the ones that are the kids right now, most of them would prefer everything digital. That would be much easier for them, and they would find it very not irritating, I would say, hectic to actually have a physical copy. And okay, if that physical copy is damaged, then I cannot play my game anymore. So the sort of the technological development has it's going to take over, as I mentioned. So it's not going to be as big, when it comes to the physical games right now. I don't think, and as you mentioned, obviously it's not going to be as big as it was, and I think that's something we all have to learn, and we're going to have to abide with, honestly. But the thing is that I believe you mentioned in the beginning, you said you wouldn't play video games, or would you not collect video games if they all go digital?
It's so difficult because I mean, I believed for the longest time I would never do digital music. I would have my iPod to take my music on the go, but I would still have my CDs at home. And now,
but it's kind of inevitable, honestly.
I can't remember the last time. I can't remember the last time I bought a CD now. So times change, and sometimes your thoughts on certain things do change. Who knows?
Exactly.
In 15 years, I could be doing digital games and just be like, oh, I still have my little collection of games physically that I could go back and really appreciate. But who knows? Mm-hmm. But right now, I'd say pretty definitively that I could see myself getting out of new games if physical disappears.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's like I'm very hard on my stance that I do not want to support digital gaming. I'm sure there's a million benefits to it. I'm not naive to that. I just the negatives of it simply outweigh the benefits, in my opinion. Now, I am saying that as a 33-year-old who's been collecting video games for a very large portion of my life. Yeah. Would that prevent me from changing and being like, hey, guys, they don't make physical video games anymore, so I'm just done with video games? No. I can still go to conventions or whatever, and pick up retro games that I missed out on. I'll still be able to have my fun in that regard.
Yes.
And it also, again, like I said at the beginning of this, I'll be like 40 years old by the time this console generation is over. I could be at a completely different place in my life where I just don't even care anymore. You know, it's kind of hard to say. And I think there's very few games that would actually draw me in enough where if like they were like, hey man, PlayStation 6 is coming out, it's digital only, what's the game that's going to bring you over? And I would say it would have to be at that point be like Shenmue 5 maybe. But like that's it. You know what I mean? Like that's like the one thing where I might be like, okay, maybe just for that one game, and then the console becomes the Shenmue machine, but that's like the only game I have it for. But like that's a completely different exception. But like outside of that, I can't imagine that I would really care.
Honestly, yeah, I guess. I mean, you guys have talked about this topic much more detail than what I have said. But again, when it comes to thinking about the way the physical things are the digital shift, I believe, in the game market, we can obviously see that it's, as I said many times, it's inevitable. And actually, the example that was mentioned about the music, you know, you would not imagine yourself listening to music digitally, but now, come on, that's the shift where I mean, this time almost everybody hears their music or their favorite music through in a digital way. You know, I would not wait for something to get released on a disc and do that. That would be something that's something you would say I would collect music CDs, but I would probably not listen to any music from the CD itself. I'll just keep the CD the way it is. And yeah, so that's the thing about it. And I believe, as far as, you know, the current generation of the younger people now would prefer digital, so that's probably the way we're heading off in the future. Now, whether we like that or not, that's something we can't control. That's the way, you know, everything is going right now in technology development. And, you know, the better alternative way is that, because we're always looking for something, the more easier way or more simpler approach, that will be the digital. So yeah, I guess it was an interesting topic to discuss, and thank you guys for talking about it in such a much detailed way than I would ever do.
I'll summarize by saying, yeah, it sucks, but it's inevitable. That's pretty much the whole subject. Yep.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty much the gist of what the audience want to hear. So if they can just, if they happen to land on this minute, that would be the gist of what we just mentioned right now, I guess.
Yeah.
Rob, sounds like you had something else to say before we move on.
Yeah, just to sum it up, there was a report that came out, I believe it was last month or the month before, from I think it was DFC Intelligence, that did a poll kind of worldwide, and the report said that there's almost 8 billion people in the country in the world right now. 3.1 billion people are video game consumers in one form or another. Now, about half of that, 1.5 billion, are PC game consumers. A lot of people, the remaining of that is mostly smartphone gaming. Only about 8% total of all of those world gamers are dedicated console players. And I bet even a smaller amount of that would be people like myself and Adam that only support physical media. So, I mean, the battles are, it's not even a war that's happening. It's already, we already lost it.
It's a Grenada-style insurgence, and we're not the U.S. We lost.
But
yeah,
the numbers by themselves speak. And personally, when it comes to physical, I enjoy collecting video games physical. And I guess, but unfortunately, you know, this is what we have to deal with. I mean, if you don't like it, the problem is, if you want to keep on going in the gaming world, you're gonna have to live with this. This is what's happening. You gotta face, face this. And so when it comes to this, that's as far as I believe. And before we get to the next subject, I wanted to shed the light on something that I heard.
Yeah, of course.
And I just want your guys' opinion and thoughts on this thing. So, as I mentioned, my friend Saeed is a shop owner. So, he said once before, and regarding to this matter, when he said about digital, when he said that everything is going digital, that's where we're heading to. Now, if you guys think of in terms of retro games, so you could see these shops like my friend's shop, their future is retro. It's kind of ironic, but that's what he said. He said the future is retro. So that's when it comes to in terms of buying and selling video games. That's where I believe we're heading to. And I think the statement is kind of interesting and factual, because as time will move forward, let's say 10, 15 years from now, when everything becomes digital, probably everything will be digital by then. What's retro? That's the future of lots of game stores out there, because when it comes to digital things, what can you sell in a store? You don't need a store to sell digital games. You just need to buy the console, and that's it. You can get the console from anywhere. But you cannot buy the games and have things like, I would say, let's say the physical copies, or sometimes the collector editions and these things. Lots of them will probably be gone by then. People will just care about the game and whatever pack DLCs you could download with it. So yeah, I say that this is what the effect of the digital shift would be on, in terms of stores, let's say. And I believe we discussed in detail about how its effect is on the gamers, I would say. So what do you guys think of this?
Let me respond by simply saying, ask GameStop how that policy worked for them. They abandoned retro games when they were highly popular, and then they were like, "Oh crap, our stock's going in the toilet. Nobody's buying from us. Hey, retro, come on in." But by that point, they had pissed everyone off, and their retro section is terrible. And now they're closing stores hand over fist, like all across the country, at least in the US.
Really? Because I've heard about the GameStop.
It's not a strategy that's panning out. It'll buy you some time. I mean, a dedicated retro game store, doesn't have the stigma that GameStop has. But, I mean, honestly, dude, like from the time, whenever we get some announcement that says that, whether it's PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, or if they actually hold out physically for the entire generation, whatever it is, whenever we hear that physical media is done for video games, I think you got maybe 10, 15 years as a retro game store owner before the audience that cares just doesn't care anymore and doesn't exist.
Well, is that is that a factor of the age of the age they're getting
the
to,
install
or
base?
Is it about the interest itself? Because I do have an interesting thing I want to mention. Yeah.
It's kind of a factor of both. I mean, think about, all right, so I'm talking about how I will be 40 by the time the next wave of consoles comes out. So let's say PlayStation 6. Let's say, for argument's sake, PlayStation 6 is digital entirely. Mm-hmm. That means that I'm banking that a retro game store at the time I'm 40 could last maybe 10 to 15 years. So by the time it's ending, I'd be like 55 years old. If I'm 55 and my highest priority is finding retro games, I probably am a loser. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that if anybody out there is into retro video games now, but if that ecosystem that we're going to exist in at that time frame is probably, I just don't think that many people are going to care about retro games anymore at that point. What do you think, Rob?
I don't know. I mean, it's so difficult to say, because this, over the past 5 years, there's definitely been a shift in the popular zeitgeist towards retro games, retro nostalgia, things like that. So, which we're near the peak of right now, but you don't know, I mean, where it's going to be. Fads come and fads go.
Yes.
But I think there's always going to be a contingent, in the same way that there's always a contingent of people that are connoisseurs of old movies, or old books, or old plays, old music. There's always going to be people that gravitate towards that, but the real fact of the matter is, if video game preservation continues to go the way it is, and there's that giant upswell of support in terms of preserving retro games for posterity in the future, it's not going to matter whether you want to play your Super Mario Brothers on your NES, which would be authentic. that's probably going to be available on the future equivalent, whether it's a Nintendo thing, whether it's via emulation, whether it's from the Library of Congress in the United States, wherever it is, that is going to be available. Yes, there are going to be games that slip through the cracks. That is unfortunate, but the same thing happens with music. There's lost music, there's lost plays, there's lost films,
movies and TV shows.
Movies and TV shows.
Well, okay,
yeah, you really cannot preserve anything, I guess, completely in the 100% range. But you can try your best to preserve. But in the end, it's inevitable that you cannot preserve everything. I believe that's what you're saying.
So.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that everything comes... These type of... all right, so we have a huge market right now for retro games, largely because those of us who are at our peak buying age, we're in our youth, we're working, we have... Well, for the most part, and we have some money to burn, we want to rebuy our childhood. We're also the nostalgia generation. We tend to bring the 90s and 80s back constantly. It's just kind of our thing. But eventually, most of us are going to age out and be like, my priorities aren't this. It's, paying a mortgage. It's buying a house. It's having kids. It's that sort of stuff. That happens throughout history. We even saw it a few years ago. Like, there was a bunch of people buying NES stuff. NES stuff pre, the current pandemic really kind of fell off in favor of 6th gen stuff because those kids finally grew up. And what happens to all the people that's buying NES stuff was like,
yes.
Well, I'm done, and now I don't want it anymore because I have to sell it to put my kid through college. This
is
just what
happens.
Actually,
yeah.
These things just come in waves. And what I'm saying is, by the time we're in our mid 50s, we're probably parents. We're probably dealing with kids who are going to college. Maybe in some cases we're even dealing with grandkids if we had them young enough or whatever. It's just I can't imagine we're like, well, all right, Bob, my son Bob needs to go to school and whatever, but I'm gonna hit this week. I'm going to the Portland Retro Game Expo. It's not gonna happen. I just don't see that being a general trend. I'm just saying retro gaming is not something that after this point can really get bigger. It only really has the chance to decrease. The reason we're seeing a weird boom right now is because everyone is stuck inside. But when that ends, it's going to go back to probably 2019 numbers, which is just while decent, is just a general trend downwards as time goes on. That's really all I'm saying.
I believe what you're saying is that we're kind of in the peak right now, we're at the peak of the curve, and unfortunately after the peak, it's all downhill, I guess, from there. But
essentially, yes. It's just a matter of how far it goes and how quickly it goes.
Yeah, so let me bring up a point I wanted to mention before we close the subject. From what I saw here, and the people I see in general in the market now, as you said, actually, it's quite funny. I am a 6th generation kid, and now I grew up, and I am getting more into trying to collect. However, I did start collecting even before I went to this age, being able to kind of be in some sort of way independent. However, there's an interesting thing I saw in some people, and I'm not sure. I don't think this is very common, and it will not really affect the general outcome that you are saying, because what you're saying, the outcome that you're talking about is actually, collectively speaking, that's what's going to happen. We're obviously going to go to a point where the people who care now about the retro games, like in some sort of generation, would not have that anymore. They would grow up. They would have eventually life to take care of, and the kids who grow up, the kids of now, will be in the future. They would give the wave to these. They would make the wave, propagate, and reach this point of time where, let's say, people who grew up with the PlayStation 4. Now that in the future, that will be what's considered retro, right? And that will be doing its best. But as far as we eventually reach the digital.
I just want to say something really quick to depress both of you. You realize next month, as soon as both PS5 and Xbox Series X are out, by technical definition, the PS4 will be retro.
Yeah.
Well,
just by technicality, yeah, that's all I'm saying. In less than a month, the PS4 will be considered retro technically. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Technically speaking, but yeah. So as I mentioned, when it comes to, and just tell me if you think this is right, when it comes to when things will become digital, and let's say 20 years after things are completely digital, what is the retro market going to be then? What's the retro market?
Niche.
If it even exists.
It'll be niche.
It'll be just about museums, I believe.
No, I think there will be museums. The
there
National Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas, is a great example of that. The Museum of Play up in New York State is a great example. Like, there will be these museums and even the Library of Congress has been really, really proactive about trying to preserve as many of these games. So there will be preserved posterity, but the market as an economic, under the economic umbrella of like a retro market, it will be niche, as in, vinyl is niche, as in, silent movies is niche, as in trains or baseball cards or whatever kind of big fad there was in the preceding decades. Video games, retro games, physical game collecting will be that. It'll be there. I don't think it entirely goes away. At least
it won't go away,
but
it will not be
at least in the foreseeable future. Yeah,
it won't be as prominent as it is now, I believe. That's what we're saying.
No,
it's not going to be as big and
close.
as prominent as. Yeah, you won't be able to basically find any game shop anywhere that sells lots of the physical games. It will not be something like that. It would be something that's, as you said, will not be considered something that's not be very prominent. But I guess this topic is very interesting to discuss about. However, I believe that's the general conclusion, as we said earlier. As you said earlier, it's inevitable. What was the thing you said? It's inevitable, and I believe Adam, you said that.
It sucks, but it's inevitable.
Yeah, it sucks, but it's inevitable. You could highlight that and put it up there in any video game collector's room. They'll be very happy about that.
Put it next to a Blockbuster sign, and there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so our next subject here comes from Oliver Clare, another Patreon backer who got to pick a subject. Now, Oliver, we got to be careful with Oliver's subjects because he has a tendency to be like, here's this little subject, and we go on about it for like 3 days because he has a habit of like being like, just name every single console and how it's all set up or whatever. In this case,
he had one subject when he came on the podcast last month, and it took us an hour and a half to get through.
Yeah, he's really good at tricking us into like making us talk forever. His first subject ever was just, hey, can you just name all your consoles and like how you rank them on a scale of like 1 to 10 or whatever? And we're like, that'll take 5 minutes. It took an hour. It was ridiculous. He's very good at this. So he has another one.
Oliver, by the way.
Yeah, we do. He was on here once too. We love him, but he's very good at tricking us into talking forever. But this one, I'm trying to scale it back because he tried to do it again, and I saw through it. He wanted to. His subject was specifically about recommended news outlets for specific consoles. He was like, can you just name like a website for every single retro console and where you get your news on it? And I'm like, probably not. I don't personally get news on it. Like, there isn't like a website I go to specifically like for NES news. But the reason I found this subject kind of interesting as a concept is because I think we're going to have different perspectives. Basically, I would kind of modify this question to say, where do you get your retro gaming news, and do you have recommendations if someone's passionate about one particular console, where to get news about it?
So, for retro gaming, I think the big one for me, for Nintendo especially, would be Nintendo Life. They're pretty much the blanket news source that I get most of my things from regarding the Nintendo Switch. Modern kind of breaking news, things like that would be Nintendo Life. But in terms of like retro stuff, Atari Age is really great, for kind of updates on, new homebrew games and mods and things like that. But in terms of just like normal news, it sucks, but it's like I often just kind of default to like Kotaku or IGN, even though it's like the quality of those sites is suspect at most of the time. That's kind of what I default to, or just word of mouth. I'll hear something from Adam or another YouTuber, like, I don't know, Pat the NES Punk's podcast or RGT85 or whatever. There's so much like repetition of gaming news nowadays from one source to another, and it just kind of passes from person to person. That's kind of how I get most of my news now.
I'm gonna go last on this one just because my perspective is gonna be a little bit warped. But Abdullah, what do you think? Like, where do you get like? Do you get news specifically about consoles, or do you just kind of? What's your story?
All right, so that would be something. Maybe I don't have a proper place or proper specific. I'd say accounts or specific outlets that I do get my information from, but in general I would say all of the information I get I usually would get from well, as Rob just mentioned, he said word of mouth. However, I would say that's somewhat of a similar way where how I get it would be word of mouth most probably, and through socializing with people who are more interested towards these things, and probably through social media, I guess, through Twitter accounts a lot, and from people like yourself who are in they're using their outlets, their social media in terms of talking about these things. So that's where I get most of the knowledge from, and I guess there are some specific examples like Rob just mentioned Nintendo Life. Now that's one of the things that I do get information from, but I would say that most of the information or the news I would get would probably be from social media accounts on, I would say in my case it would be Twitter, and usually when you would see something that would repeat more than once, well that's not something that would mean that it's right, but however when you see it repeated more than once you might get interested on it and you might actually think about it and read about these things and actually get the proper information. So with the current social media, I guess the power of social media, you can easily get lots of information just by following the people who talk about these contents. Now, this would be a good source if you follow the people who talk about these things or who have who dedicated lots of their life to talk or have interest in these things. I would say, let's say retro games. I guess those would be some sort of good news source that you would get information from. No need for you to follow the original source. You would get to know that through lots of people, and that's actually where most of people get their their knowledge from.
Dude, you hit the nail on the head. That's basically exactly where I was going. So apologies to Oliver, because what I'm sure he wanted us to talk about, like, oh, if I'm into the Dreamcast, do I follow Dreamcast Junkyard? Or if I'm in the Saturn, like, I think it's Saturn Katori or something like that. There's a specific Saturn website. I apologize, I don't go there much. But I think that's what he's looking for. Unfortunately, it sounds like neither of you get your news from that type of thing. And the truth is, just like you were talking about, there's people that are like the news source. I actually happen to kind of be that. So I have like a weird perspective on this, which is actually kind of why I was excited about talking about this, because I've been doing, retro gaming YouTube stuff for 11 years at this point. So what happens now is if there's news that's interesting that comes out about a retro game console, I don't have to look it up. Dude, the people who make that stuff come to me and tell me about it. Like, Rob, you were with me when we were at Video Games New York, right?
Yeah.
Just like 2 weeks ago. And Video Games New York is actually one of the most prominent distributor of the new Dreamcast games. So literally, I walk in there and I'm talking to Dan for like 20 minutes, and he's like, here's every new game that's coming out. Here's all the details about it. Just whenever you're cool with talking about it, we'd, love to have you on board, that type of thing. So like, I get it from the horse's mouth. Like, I don't ever have to look up like what's going on in the Dreamcast scene, because trust me, they'll find me. And even if it's something I'm not known for, like, say, friggin' Jaguar CD news, trust me, it'll show up on my Discord, it'll show up on my Twitter. I end up being like, oh wow, I just kind of hear all this stuff. And honestly, at this point, it sounds weird to say, but like at this point, my audience knows me well enough to know what I will and will not care about. So it's very unlikely that I wouldn't hear about like the new HDMI board that's going to be like that Dan Coons is working on for the original Xbox that you can put in there. Like, my audience knows me well enough that they would most certainly tell me about that within seconds. Although Dan himself did. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like all my interests in retro games are just kind of spoon-fed to me. It's very weird. And then I like to actually go out there and tell people about it because they're right. I'm interested in about it. So to what you said, that is exactly the right answer on where to get a lot of your retro game news. It's follow the people who are known to distribute that type of information.
Exactly.
Which typically, these days typically it's YouTubers. To be completely honest, it's really where a lot of them go for that information, because even you got to think about it too. These are retro game consoles. They don't get a lot of media coverage. So their typical strategy is to find influencers that are interested in talking about it. That's the only reason people like Dan or whatever will come to me and say, like, hey man, I'm working on this new game, or I'm working on this thing, would you be interested in talking about it? Because they know CNN or whatever isn't going to cover it. It's not a big release, it's not important. But a retro gaming YouTuber who's into Dreamcast, yeah, I might talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's how lots of people, including actually myself, who got into retro games, is through these, let's say, those platforms. It's not through official media outlets, the ones on TV, that you would get to your knowledge. It's actually from the people like yourselves, like YouTubers, and those are the main source of information that you guys have. Other than you as you just mentioned, you get approached by the official sources. So from our side, from my perspective at least as a fan, yeah, that's where I get most of my information, through you guys.
There you go. Sorry, Oliver. I know you were looking for like great recommendations on individual sites, but the truth is, it's kind of an aughts concept, maybe like a 90s concept to still have like a dedicated website to what's going on with, the Amiga CD32. I don't think any people really bother with that type of thing anymore. There's going to be some, but, for the most part, that same type of information just kind of leaks out across the board and just kind of gets really spread across Twitter by the usual suspect influencers. And I feel weird saying that because I am one of them. So it's like I'm trying to offer that perspective, but also not come off like, guys, trust me, I'm a very reputable source. Always follow me for news. Because I'm not. That's not where I'm going with it. It's
you want that? You want the newest news? Smash that like button.
Smash that like button. Like, follow, and subscribe. Ugh. No, I'm not saying any of that crap. All I'm saying is, that's where I get my news is like literally the guys making it are like, here's the news, and I'm like, oh, cool. Retweet. You know what I mean? Like that's my perspective. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway. Anything else to contribute on this particular subject?
No,
I think we settled this completely, I guess.
Boom. That was efficient. I liked it. All right. So thank you very much, Oliver, as always, for picking a subject, and we look forward to what you do next month. So now we are at the point of the show where we have a round of shout-outs. All the following people are Patreon backers, and they are at the level in which they get a shout-out. And you too can join at any time. You can get early access to this or any of the videos. You can get a shout out. You can pick a subject, or like Abdullah here, you can actually be on the podcast, and you help keep Rob on the podcast, as we talked about earlier. Poor little Rob. Anyway, shout outs. Michael Kelly, Luis Bonilla, Joseph Tamburino, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Michael Kelly, Luis Bonilla, Joseph Tamburino, and Trey Wagner. Thank you very much, all of you. You're all awesome. As well as you, Abdullah. You're the best. You're so much better than Rob. I love you so much.
Thank you so much.
So much better.
Don't worry, Rob. You'll get there.
Yeah, one day, Rob. One day.
Rob.
We'll move on to the next subject. This one was chosen by another backer. This is Caleb Bravo. He is the supreme overlord of my Discord. On my Discord, which there's a link in the description, you can join that for free. There's no fee to join that. However, if you are on the Patreon and you link it to the Discord, you get like a special badge that says you're a Patreon backer. But he's like the overall like lord of my Discord. Like, I am the Queen of England in there. I'm just a figurehead. I have no real power. He's like, he's like all of Parliament or whatever. Like, he's just got supreme power in that place. And he has chosen a subject for this month, which is he wanted to talk about the 9th Gen Pre Order Debacle that was trying to get a PS5 and trying to get an Xbox Series X. And Abdullah, I'm actually very interested on hearing your perspective on this, because I can only talk about what it was like in the US, but I'm curious, like, first of all, did you try to get either console? And if you did, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I was able to pre-order the PlayStation, but I didn't get a chance to get the Xbox. Honestly, I don't even know that there's a chance to pre-order it anyway now.
That's totally fine. I'm just curious, like, did you go to a store? Did you do it online? Was it easy? Was it hard?
Well, it was, from what I have seen, is that it was not that easy. Some people had to go to the store. Some people did it online. And, when these things come, it's similar all over the world. You would get the people who would pre-order a bunch, and then they would try to sell you the pre-order for double the price. That's kind of what happened here. And personally, I did it. I pre-ordered through my friend shop. That's how I pre-ordered it in a normal way.
Oh, so you just walked in and you just did it?
Jotted. Yeah, I told them I jotted down my name, and that was it. That I'll get a pre-order of the PlayStation 5.
I'm
and
so jealous.
Yeah, that's so much easier than the bullshit that we had to deal with.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's actually quite simpler over here. Yeah.
Rob, what was your experience like?
I was going to be a day one adopter on the PS5, but as I mentioned before, I'm kind of holding back. I want to hear some user testimonials about the backwards compatibility aspects of the system before I pull the trigger on it. So I didn't try with that. I did try actively to get a Series X via Best Buy, because that's really the only company that I'll buy from. So yeah, the day of whatever day that was, I think about the 22nd or something. I went online, tried to get one, and no go. It was impossible. It was not shown to be available for purchase or pre-order, and when it was, I clicked it and it says, "Oh, too many people are doing this, so it's not in your cart. Try again later." Kind of that whole spiel. Bottom line, I was not able to get one, sadly. I do possibly have an in to get one. My wife actually is a manager at Kohl's department store, and supposedly they're going to be getting some in maybe around Black Friday. So I might be able to pick one up that way. Also, I'm unsure because I haven't heard anything about it from the retailers. I'm curious to see if stores like GameStop or stores like Best Buy, Target, Walmart are going to be getting any physical systems in store the day of, like if you could line up and get one, because that was what happened with the Switch. Is I had a pre-order that actually fell through via GameStop, and I ended up just going to a Target the morning of the Switch's release and getting one instead. So I'm hoping that maybe Best Buy will be able to do that, so I might just go a couple days beforehand and just be like, "Yo, is this happening? Are you getting any, the day of?" and kind of hope it happens.
So, yeah, my experience was a little different. Basically, I was hoping to successfully pre-order one of each. I basically am sitting on a whole bunch of Best Buy credit. Like he said, I just want to get my stuff through Best Buy. I don't want to do it anywhere else. Like, I'm sitting on like $380 worth of Best Buy Reward Zone points, and then my mother, who passed away recently, I had to close out one of her credit cards, and she had a whole bunch of points built up, and I was allowed to distribute them for Best Buy gift cards. So then that added like $250 worth of additional Best Buy gift cards. So I was thinking, okay, I'll go into this generation like 50% off. So basically, like, if I could use half off on each console, how great would that be? But I'll spare you the details, but I tried to do that with the PS5, and like he said, when the PS5, man, when they put those pre-orders up, it was this debacle where they were like, they're up, sort of. Hey, they're going up the night before in some places and not other places. So it was just like complete chaos across all the known distributors, and Best Buy being no exception. I tried to buy it there. It's like it would show up on the website, it would get into the cart, and you couldn't complete the checkout. And it was just this like super frustrating, annoying process that I kept watching all over Twitter. People are screaming at Best Buy and screaming at all the, like, the retailers, like, can you make your website work? How did you not anticipate that the PS5 might be something people want? You know what I mean? It's just like, we still live in an age where that happens. So it was very frustrating, and eventually it simply failed. Like, I actually got successfully to the checkout page one time, where all you do is, like, all your information's already preloaded because you have your account, all your payment stuff is ready to go, and all you got to do is hit confirm. And I got to that page and I hit confirm, and then it just asked me to log in again for no reason. And then when I did log in, it said the item was no longer in my cart. So it just failed again for no reason whatsoever. So very, very frustrating. And then eventually I failed entirely at that. Then, and I know this is why, Caleb brought this subject into question. Caleb actually messaged me. He's like, "Yo, dude, did you get a PS5?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "All right, so I got two. I got one at like GameStop and I got one at Amazon." He's like, "I'll sell you the one at Amazon for what I paid for it and just, have it sent to you." And I was like, "No, I'll wait," because two reasons. One, I want to use that Best Buy credit. and two, I just there was an article the other day actually where Sony was talking about how they expect the PS5 to sell 7 million units by April 2021. If that has any truth to it at all, it means they're going to be really easy to find after a short period of time. So I'm not really worried about eventually being able to use my Best Buy credit for that thing. So I may not have one at launch, whatever, I'll deal with it. Xbox, on the other hand, they kept like making fun of Sony for the botched launch and how badly that went and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, here's the exact time all our stuff is going for sale. Here's the exact day. Be ready. It's going to happen. So I'm like, okay, round number 2. We're going to make this work. We're going to go for it. And so I was, again, I'm like, Best Buy only. That's the only place where I'm willing to do this. So then pre-orders go up. They go up at Target. They go up at, Amazon. They go up at Xbox.com. However, Xbox.com was the only one to actually have them go up at the time they said. All the other retailers just picked random-ass times again. And so I'm sitting there like, Best Buy, it was like 3 hours after Best Buy actually said they would go up. It finally did. But in that time, I was like, what do I do? What do I do? So everybody's trying to buy one at Xbox.com. I can't get, no one can get it to work. I just tried just for the hell of it. I just saw, I was like curious, can I put one in my cart at Xbox.com? And it went in my cart. And then I was like, can I proceed to checkout? And it just proceeded to checkout. And I was like, what if I actually just hit confirm? Because they don't charge you right away, and I can cancel the order if I want to. And it just confirmed, and all of a sudden I was totally secured for an Xbox Series X. So I'm like, okay, so that's a good backup, because if the Best Buy thing doesn't work, I'll have this. I can always cancel it, whatever. Eventually, Best Buy goes up and has theirs on sale. And it's the same bullshit all over again, where you put it in your cart and it throws it out of the cart and blah, 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 blah. I eventually take screenshots of this. I throw them up on Twitter and I tag Best Buy in it because, believe it or not, the guy who controls the Best Buy Twitter, I know watches my channel. He's literally tweeted about me before. He's like, we love Playload, blah, blah, blah. He watches the channel. So I'm like, he's going to see this. So I was like, can you fix this? And he never responded or anything. But I swear to you, within 20 minutes, it actually worked. I got one all the way through Best Buy. So then I had 2. Didn't need 2. So I paid for the Best Buy one, half off. And then I was going to cancel the Xbox, order on Xbox.com. But a buddy of mine messaged me. He's like, dude, I failed completely. I'm trying to get one. I got no luck. And I was like, here's the deal. I got 2 of them. Why don't you just pay me for one of them and I'll just have it shipped to you? That way everybody wins. And he was like, done. So I did get an Xbox, but I failed spectacularly to get a PS5. But I'm hoping to amend that before it actually launches.
Well, these stories are much crazier than what I had gone through. It was very
right.
simple.
You just walked into a fucking store and said, "Yeah, I'll take one," and that was over. There's no drama. There's no bullshit. It's just great.
It was very easy the way I did it. And actually, it is kind of crazy when it comes to certain stores here. But this is the first time I hear of such kind of stories. Actually, quite interesting.
Yeah, Americans are nothing if complainers. We love to do that, but but it makes sense.
But comparatively, compared to what you did, as you said, I just walked into a fucking store and I want a PS5 right now.
I'm envious, but it's like Rob said. I'm gonna try near the beginning of the launch, go over to Best Buy and be like, "Yo, are you actually gonna have PS5s in stock?" And if they're like, yes, but you have to camp out or whatever, then maybe I'll do it. But, we'll see. Because it would be nice to have both by launch. I'm trying to remember when Xbox One and PS4 launched, it was actually relatively easy to walk in and just get one. The same with the Wii U. It was the Switch where you couldn't walk in and get one.
Well, this is a problem indicative of video games in general nowadays as scalpers. That's bots that try and bring up the price on these things artificially by just making them scarce. And part of that has to do with a company like Nintendo where they kind of make their own scarcity problems. But scalpers were a big problem with both of these launches and the launch of the Switch. I can almost guarantee that I think for the first maybe 6 months that this thing is going to be available, unless they're inundated in store with consoles, that it's going to be a bit difficult to get them.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to this, it's kind of like a bubble in the beginning. If the console sells well, they're no longer going to need to go through such hell, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it already sold well. Obviously, it sold out of its fucking pre-orders, but it's like...
Yeah, most definitely.
But there's a giant percentage of people that didn't get any, and yet they're on fucking eBay for like $1,000. So
and some people would actually... Some people would go and buy those, to be honest. I believe that there are
I
lots
know.
of
some people
do.
do. Yeah.
Buy those. Yeah.
I was reading a lot about it. Like, it turns out Microsoft's less guilty of this. I guess Microsoft has a firmer sense of how many units they actually have, but Sony was allowing companies to just kind of pre-order regardless if they're actually going to have them in stock. So and Amazon is probably going to be the most guilty of this. Amazon is a little different than the way a lot of these companies work. Like Best Buy, for example, will typically only sell a pre-order for something they know they're actually going to have. But Amazon is willing to take pre-orders on stuff they will eventually have. And the difference in practical terms there is when Best Buy says they're sold out, they mean there are no more units. Amazon doesn't say they're sold out unless they're like, well, maybe we'll have one next year. I don't really know. So the launch can come and maybe 10,000 people or whatever just pre-ordered on Amazon, but like they only get 1,000 units. They just ship them to 1,000 people at random and they tell the rest, it's delayed. You'll just have to wait.
Yeah, that actually happened to me. It's the exact problem.
There you go. I think that'll probably be a big issue. Sony in particular was claiming that you may not get it until 2021, even if you pre-ordered it. Just warning you. They seem to be. I mean, I've been reading a lot about their behind-the-scenes stuff. They've been having a lot of manufacturing issues with the PS5, mostly due to the current pandemic, just labor shortages. I'm not sure how Microsoft is getting away with it, or if they're just paying way more or something. I don't know what they're doing, but I'm not hearing anything about them having shortage problems. But maybe I'm just not seeing those articles. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so ideally, if I could, I would get both consoles for launch. I will have at least the Xbox Series X unless my order directly from Microsoft somehow does not show up on time. All right, thanks, Caleb. All right, the last subject here is actually from Leafy. Now, last month we had another guest on named Leafy who is actually supposed to be on here this month, but he had scheduling conflicts. So I was like, do you want any subject? He's like, yeah, just pick one. Doesn't matter. So I just picked one on his behalf. And this was kind of what we were talking about at the beginning where I said, you know how the countries usually video game industry tends to focus on like the US and Japan, and like the rest of the world can just kind of enjoy the benefit or whatever. Japan now is going to start getting screwed a little bit by this policy, specifically with the PS5. Now, Rob, you may be aware of this. Abdullah, I'm not sure if you are, but did you guys know that on the PlayStation controller, since the PS1, you know how there's a circle button and there's a crossbar button or an X button?
Yes.
In most of the world, when you press the circle button, it goes, back, or it's a negative command to like go back to the previous screen, where X or crossbar is to confirm something. Now in Japan, it's always been flipped because the X or the cross actually in Japanese culture means no or stop or whatever. So they just decided, okay, we'll make that very literal. So when you're canceling an action in a game, you would press the X button. So the mapping on the controller has always been flipped. So you'll notice it if you ever...
Yeah, I think I heard of that, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
In Japan, right? It's the opposite.
In Japan, it's in Japan only. So if you imported a Japanese PlayStation 2 game or whatever, for example, you might have noticed that problem, and it becomes a little weird when you're trying to play them because it becomes non-instinctual. And they've just been dealing with this since PS1. But I guess they decided with PS5, they're like, we're going for uniform. Japan's the only country that doesn't do it that way, so they're forcing Japan to change. So Japan is going to have now X to confirm and the circle button to go back, just like everybody else, which doesn't sound like a big deal at first because it doesn't really change anything for us. But it actually, to me, makes a big statement because the Japanese are not really known for changing on stuff like that. And Sony is in of themselves a Japanese company, and they've always kind of geared their video game consoles to Japan first, and then the rest of the world can kind of just enjoy whatever they create out of it. So the fact that they would make a change like this might be suggestive of their willingness to abandon physical media and just kind of change their general attitude. Because one of the points I've always made about the PlayStation is one of the reasons I think they're clinging to physical media is simply because the Japanese audience does not embrace digital. They just don't, at least not in consoles yet. And the only reason Microsoft hasn't done away with digital is because Sony hasn't, or done away with physical is because Sony hasn't. But if they're now saying like, we may be Japanese, but we don't really care anymore, that's a bold statement, and that could have eventual ripple effects, I'm thinking, throughout time. So yes, this in of itself is small, but it could be the core of something bigger. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's weird that they're doing that. I guess, as a guy that teaches video game history classes, if you want your history lesson for today, so the design of the symbols on the PlayStation, the 4 Surface buttons, I think obviously circle was to confirm. X is basically universal in Japan and really kind of everywhere as no, so it's kind of weird that they honestly chose that when they were localizing the system for American and European markets, that just X would be confirmed when it should be no. And it's also the placement, the Japanese placement of the buttons also mirrors the Nintendo's button layout.
Well, that makes sense. They just stole the controller.
Yeah, exactly. But
it was literally a Super Nintendo controller.
Yeah, but on their reasoning for the button, the symbols on the buttons, the X was obviously no. The triangle would be, I believe, like the camera reset button, because the triangle was supposed to be like the focus of light through a camera aperture. It would be a triangle of light, and then the square button was going to be like a map or a window function. So it would just like open up a menu or something. So that was the reasoning behind the design of those things. But that aside, history aside, done. The
nerd
done. A nerd, yeah, exactly. So that aside, I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, I think maybe Sony just decided that it was a lot more simple just to say, okay, this is it. We're just going to make it uniform. And you could say it's maybe a shift away from looking at the Japanese market as like the real focus group for video games for their company. Honestly, I just think that, okay, the amount of video game, customers that use the PlayStation outside of Japan far outweigh the amount of people that use it inside Japan. So I think they basically said, okay, we have to make this uniform across all regions. Let's just use the layout that the vast majority of people in the world use. I think that's
I agree you're approaching it from a level of pragmatism, but that's kind of my point, is they're not usually pragmatic about stuff like this. Usually it's pride over pragmatism.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying it's kind of a bold move.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering who made that decision. That's all.
Now you see, if you're looking at it like in terms of the video game company's personalities, that Sony would do something controversial like this and piss off a portion of its fan base. And if Microsoft would be the other thing, they'd just be like, oh, we're just going to allow you to map the buttons the way you want them. That'd be the Microsoft response to that. Just like, oh,
well,
Sony got you to,
you know what's hilarious about that is I can actually cite an example relevant to controllers that's like that. So you remember how the PS3 didn't originally launch with vibration in the controller?
Yeah, it was the 6-axis and not the DualShock.
Right, it couldn't vibrate. Now, people don't tend to know this. There was actually a reason for that. There was a company that developed the rumble technology that went into into the N64 controller, the Dreamcast jump pack, the PlayStation 2 technology, and the original Xbox technology. So it reached a point as 6th gen was kind of winding down and 7th gen was coming up, where this company basically decided to go through lawsuits. They basically were convinced that Sega was irrelevant because they weren't doing it anymore, so they didn't target them. With Nintendo, I guess Nintendo had just done something just different enough that they didn't have a case. But with Sony and Microsoft, they were like, this is ironclad. You cannot get out of this. You totally screwed up. So Sony's like sitting there panicking, and they're trying to change stuff. And ultimately, that's why they didn't have vibration in their controllers, at least initially. You know what Microsoft did? They bought the company that was filing the lawsuit. And they're like, whatever. Now we're not suing ourselves. Then we're out of this. And that was it. That was their solution, was just buy the company that's suing us, and then we'll end the lawsuit. I mean, it's like evil genius. But that's exactly the same type of logic. If Microsoft did something like that, they would just essentially buy out the problem. Oh, we don't have enough exclusives? That's cool. We'll just buy Bethesda. Whatever.
Yeah,
how did that not become a topic this month? I'm just going to say that. That was
feel free.
No, we don't want another 4-hour podcast.
No, I mean we'll come back to it in a second. Let Abdullah say what he was going to say, and we'll just kind of graze that one. It's fine.
All right. So I think first of all, regarding the Microsoft buying themselves out of the problem, I guess that's the simplest solution they can find. And they keep doing that. Who knows where they're going to reach? However, if we, as you guys have mentioned almost everything regarding this topic, I guess I have nothing more to say, as not really. I didn't really know quite well about the buttons, for example, the difference in Japan and the outside world. I didn't know that.
Most people don't.
You really have to have played. You either have to have been to Japan or played Japanese imports to even really notice, and you have to do it pretty much on just PS1, PS2, PS3, and to a lesser extent PS4.
Yeah.
Mostly PS2 is where people actually notice, because it seemed like PS1 didn't have a ton of imports where that mattered. PS3 and PS4 looked like they let you change it a lot of the time in game. It's PS2 where people imported the crap out of it, and it was like locked and you couldn't change it. That's where people tend to notice like that something's wrong. But it's like one of those little things that seems kind of irrelevant, at least to us. But apparently they're super pissed, and I can see why.
Yeah, I think. But that's the first time I've heard that there's some sort of difference but I didn't really experience a lot of it. That's why I have not much of knowledge about this, because I personally play most of the games I play are Nintendo games, so that's why not so much experience when it comes to this point. But it was actually kind of it was actually very interesting to know these things.
Yeah, there you go. So that'll be the end of that particular subject. Thank you, Leafy. So since we're going to do this, we're going to add this little bonus subject, but it will not be brought to you by Rob. Instead, it will be brought to you by Leafy, Caleb, Oliver, and Abdullah, as well as Michael Kelly, Luis Bonilla, Joseph Tamburino, and Trey Wagner. All of them somehow brought up the subject. It was just an amazing coincidence that just happened while you guys were talking. All of them decided that they wanted us to talk about Microsoft acquiring Bethesda. So go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I don't know anything. Microsoft acquired Bethesda?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It was like $7.5 billion, and they bought out Bethesda. Bethesda, of course, being the parent company that I'm sure you guys don't need this information. You all know it. They made Elder Scrolls. They own the rights to Fallout. They own Doom. They own
Wolfenstein.
Wolfenstein. They bought all of id Software's titles. They basically acquired a ton of ZeniMax. Well, to be fair, they bought out ZeniMax, which is the parent company of Bethesda, and that basically meant all that game content went with it. There's so much you can unpack with this. I'm going to say it that logically, if Microsoft was any other video game company in history, I would say, wow, power move. They're going to do this for a ton of exclusive content. But because they're Microsoft, I'm like, I think they just acquired them to acquire them, because they're odd. They don't really care about exclusive content, as they've made plainly clear. In fact, some of the Bethesda titles had exclusivity deals with Sony, and Microsoft straight up said, "Yeah, we're gonna honor those." It's like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing. It's like Microsoft has been doing this lately, where it's like they'll put their big killer apps on other systems. The biggest being Minecraft. The developer that produced Minecraft is owned by Microsoft. Minecraft is the biggest game in the fucking universe right now, and it has
$4 billion. They bought Mojang for $4 billion, and they're still like, yeah, it's the biggest game ever, but we'll put it on all of our competition.
Yeah, anyways, it's on everything. So it's like, I don't I mean, if they made Fallout exclusive to the Xbox, that would be a killer app. If they made Elder Scrolls 6 exclusive to the Xbox, that would be that's a coup. But you don't know if it's going to happen. You don't know if the next Doom, the next Wolfenstein, the next Elder Scrolls is going to be exclusive to the Xbox or the PC, whatever, Microsoft. If it was a Microsoft exclusive, it's a huge coup. And I don't understand why. Well, I mean, I understand why they're doing it, because they don't care necessarily about their console doing well. They care about their service and their name doing well and their properties. So if they're looking at it as just a moneymaker, they're going to make money on it regardless of where it is going to be. So they might as well just give it as many platforms as possible to be on. But the old school gamer in me, which looks at exclusives like Nintendo and Sega had in the original console wars, is like the things that make or break a console are like, why would you put your games on your rival competition? That makes no sense. But Xbox is playing a very different game to to how it used to be done.
It's not strictly the same.
It's not even close. Like, the idea is so, like, mind-bendingly weird to us because of exactly what Rob just said. But they're probably looking at it from a perspective of, like, well, we own it, and if we put it on PlayStation, it'll sell.
Yeah.
Yes, but you're hurting your own brand. Like, why are you doing both? Why are you creating the Xbox's hardware while also simultaneously becoming a game publisher for what is supposed to be your competition? And the weird thing is, I read this article the other day that basically said Microsoft doesn't really consider PlayStation its competitor anymore. They just kind of consider them like another gaming toy. Same with Nintendo, where they're like, we're willing to work with you guys, we don't care. They're willing to work with Sony. They like it's kind of like big brother little brother syndrome. It seems like Sony looks at Microsoft like that's their competition, and Microsoft looks at Sony like that's cute, that's fine, like whatever. Like they have an odd dynamic. And the funniest ironic part about that is Sony, I mean, to keep it completely real with you, has beaten them every single generation of existence, like by a lot. I mean, Abdullah, you just said it yourself. Mm-hmm. In Dubai, you're like not even sure if the Xbox Series X is coming out.
Yeah,
is that correct?
It's probably it's coming out obviously, but I don't think. And as I told you, it's the market for PlayStation here is very, very huge compared to the Xbox. So you don't have lots of people here who talk about it, and that's how it is here. Which is an interesting thing.
That's the truth about. That's the truth about how it is in most of the world. The Xbox, I mean, most of my audience is American, and to be honest, most of the audience, the Western gaming audience, typically is American due to just sheer population. Mm-hmm. But so we tend to forget that the Xbox brand is really only relevant in like 4 countries. That would be the US itself, Canada, Australia, and the UK. It's not even really relevant in most of Europe. If you have to go to mainland Europe, Germany at best, and even there it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I mean, we have it, but who cares? Like, if you go to, and most countries, they don't even bother releasing it there, or if they do, it's like, you're the weirdo who bought an Xbox in that country. That's strange.
Yes,
and
that's exactly how it is here sometimes. The
yeah,
weirdos,
and that's how.
Yeah.
At least in Japan they tried, but they gave up pretty much, and I don't blame them because they just couldn't really get a foothold there. They kind of did with the 360, and then they shot themselves in the foot, but whatever, that's a different story. But it is a very strange business strategy they have, and I can't even really fault them for it because they seem to have like infinite money and they can just do whatever they want. What I think blows my mind the most is we talk about this from the angle of like, wow, they bought Bethesda, how crazy. But what we tend to ignore is how much they bought them for. They bought them for $7.5 billion. Now, to put that in perspective, Disney bought Marvel for just under $4 billion. And they bought Star Wars for just barely over $4 billion. That means in Microsoft's eyes, Bethesda was worth basically the same as all of Marvel and all of Star Wars.
But I mean,
does that seem right?
Yeah, I think it does, because the video game industry nowadays is bigger than the music and movie industry combined.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, let me put it this way: Would Disney have bought Star Wars and then said, "Okay, Universal Pictures, go make Star Wars"?
No.
You know
what
I'm saying? Like, it doesn't fucking make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Their willingness to put it on other platforms. It does make sense, like the dollar amount, what they paid it for. But the way they're utilizing it is weird. But I figure, I mean, they're just going to make money regardless. So they're going to, I mean, what does it matter?
I would love to sit here and crunch the numbers. Like, I would love to actually get access to all the numbers and see what the Xbox brand as a whole has spent versus what it has brought in, because we know straight up the official numbers on the original Xbox. They left the original Xbox negative $4.4 billion. That was their starting point. Negative $4.4 billion walking into the Xbox 360. 360 did well, but then they had to spend something like $1.2 billion to repair all the Red Rings of Death units.
Yeah.
And so they ended up kind of coming out even, which means, debatably, you're still sitting there on the Xbox brand going into the Xbox One at a negative $4.4 billion roughly. Xbox One has not been the biggest hit. And they keep sitting there buying up more studios. And I gotta think, like, if you sit back and look at all the numbers, everything they brought in versus everything they spent, I mean, you just spent $7.5 billion on Bethesda, which at this point has not yielded anything other than maybe their stock jumping, which, to be fair, is a very real value. But you got to sit there and go, like, how does that balance sheet work? Like, can we actually sit here and say, debatably, that the Xbox brand is like negative $10 billion in its 20-year lifespan?
Must be nice to have money.
I mean, really, like, think about that. Just try to crunch those numbers. Doesn't that kind of blow your mind a little?
I mean, I don't know. Like, you're operating under the assumption that the Xbox One, it's coming in last in this console generation. That much is obvious. But just because it's coming last doesn't mean it wasn't a success. I mean, that's
not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying.
But if you're talking about cold hard dollar amounts and the bottom line of breaking even, it's like they might have, with the success of Minecraft, with the success of the Xbox to a certain point, not as much as the PlayStation, but I mean, Microsoft is is far more wealthy, so they're able to eat it. But it's like, I'm wondering if they've made money. It's possible that they did. It's quite possible. Like, through all of their licensing, all of their assets, the breaking even on the Xbox 360. I think the success, not overt success of the Xbox One, but still success. I don't know if they're selling these consoles at a loss. We don't know with the Xbox One if they are. So who knows? I mean, they must have had some profitability. Dude,
that's exactly what I want to know. I'm not, for people listening, I'm not sitting here saying Microsoft has lost $10 billion on the Xbox brand. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is I want to know what the numbers are, because they bought Mojang for $4 billion. Has Minecraft, since the time Microsoft owned it, not prior, but since they've owned it, have they brought in $4 billion in surplus profits to make that cost justified? And that doesn't mean income, because they still have to pay for the products they're putting out in the first place. It's not like they can, we made a new version of Minecraft and we sold a lot of copies. It's like, yeah, but you had to develop that in the first place. So it's like, how much profit came from that new version, and did it eventually exceed $4 billion? Probably not. How long will it take before the Bethesda assets yield a profit? How long before Double Fine? I mean, they bought up with like 13 studios going into E3 2019, something like that. And how many of them have actually yielded a profit? Hell, did Rare ever yield a profit?
Rare never did. Rare never
You
did.
see what I'm saying? Like, they absorb all of these things, and I'm genuinely curious if you were to just say we're starting all the way back from the original Xbox, like conception phase, all the way to the day, you know, the Xbox Series X launches, what are those numbers? And like, I would bet you with the way that they hemorrhage money that the only reason they're still around is because they are literally Microsoft. If Sony were to do that, they'd have been gone long ago.
Do you think Sony has $7 billion to spend like on a
No,
single
that's my
developer?
point.
It's like they
That's
don't.
my point.
It's
It's exactly my point.
Sony's a leper colony, and the only thing that is making money is the PlayStation. That's the only thing propping them up at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of
I actually
do agree with what you guys are saying, because it is Microsoft in the end we're talking about here. So it's not a simple company. It's way beyond that.
Yeah, and that's why I'm curious, because I'm sure from Microsoft's perspective, they eventually see Xbox functioning as simply like a global brand to just be associated with video games, like the way Kleenex is associated with tissue. Like, it's just the new name. Like, I almost feel like that's what they're going for, because they just do not seem to care about the hardware itself. They're like, we can inject Xbox software into anything. We can put it into phones. We can put it into PCs. We can make it an app on your PlayStation. We don't care. It's the hardware we make. Yes, technically, if you want to buy our hardware, sure. But eventually, the concept of Xbox Game Pass will be an ecosystem thing you can just put on any device. I mean, how unrealistic is that? I think that that's very, very probable at some point. They're kind of like evolving into this next level creature that we've never seen before, because they just have the money to do it. Whereas Nintendo and Sony are still following an older model, one that I prefer, to keep it real with you. But there's no way Sony or Nintendo, even if somehow they combined their assets, could do what Microsoft just did.
Nope.
And that's why it's like hilarious when people are talking about like, oh, what's next? You know, maybe Nintendo will buy Sega. I'm so tired of hearing that one. It's like, dude, Nintendo got outbid by Sega for Atlas. You know, like it's not feasible to just like start absorbing these big entities. Like, you inherit their problems too. And Microsoft has proven time and time again over the last 2 decades, they just don't care. They will cut you a check and be done with it. It's weird. It really is weird. And I just want everybody to stop and think about that more than think about like, oh, cool, we're getting a new Fallout soon. Like, sure, you'll get that. But don't you think that's weird how they're going about making it happen?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to Microsoft compared to Sony and Nintendo, yeah, they're pretty huge compared to their competitors. Yeah. However, what's ironic is what you mentioned is that their competitors are doing better than them. When you think about the Switch and the PS4, they're doing relatively better.
They're doing substantially better. That's actually my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. That's how much they're losing money hand over fist constantly. They've been doing it for 2 decades, and yet they go ahead and buy Bethesda for $7.5 billion.
What if they were doing their the best? What could they do now, bigger than this?
Yeah. Like, how much bigger? Yes, that's a great way of putting it. Let's say all this time, since day one of the original Xbox, Microsoft had just dominated. Maybe the original Xbox got like PS2 numbers, and the Xbox 360 got Wii numbers, and then the Xbox One got Switch and PS4 numbers. You know, like, what if that was the case?
What more can they do?
What world would we live in? Would it just be like Xbox is just video games because they would have just simply absorbed everything?
Yeah.
Kind of the way Disney was absorbing everything before the pandemic. Like, would it just be like a handful of companies like that?
Yeah,
it's just one of those things I think about.
They may change the definition of video games to Xbox if that were the case. I mean, if they're losing and they're doing this much, if you think about it, I believe, yeah.
Exactly. So, it's fascinating to think about.
Of course.
Anything else on this subject, Rob? I think you're crying in the background.
No, let's move on.
All right.
There's nothing else to move on to. That was our bonus subject brought to you by...
Put me out of my misery.
That was the bonus subject brought to you by Leafy. Abdullah, I don't even know how you messaged me without Rob hearing during that. That was great. Leafy, Abdullah, Caleb, Trey, Joseph, Luis, Michael, and Oliver all requested that subject in the same moment, and Rob didn't know about it. It was really weird, but thank you guys for doing that. But that'll do it for the podcast here. So I do want to thank once again. I want to thank Leafy Abdullah. I want to thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome.
I also
hope
want
it was not, because I think I was pretty bad in this one.
No, you're great.
I hope that
you're
if
way
I'm-
better than me.
But we'll see you next month too, so it doesn't matter.
Hope-
It'll be great.
Hopefully.
But you'll be here. You'll definitely be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Caleb, Trey, Joseph, Luis, Michael, and Oliver. Thank you all so much. Rob, I guess you can give you a thank you too. You're not bad. You're pretty cool. But if you want to help Rob out, don't forget what he said. You can join the Patreon at any time, and we can make Rob a permanent fixture so that he can constantly get beaten down and have his self-confidence just fall further and further. But seriously, everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening. Much appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, join all that stuff in the socials.
You can find me at Grappadora_gaming on Instagram, where you can see me post weird shit that I find at Digital Press Clifton and in my game collection. And stay in touch.
And you can see his picture of Rob Thanos, which I want to give a shout out to a guy in my Discord who made that, named Pizza Parker. And Abdullah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to having you here next month, and we'll continue with more of this.
Hopefully, and thank you for giving me the chance to participate in this. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, bye everybody.